Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Zone Star State podcast. I'm Matthew Brune, and joining me once again is Ishmael Johnson. Here on April 1st, we're no longer in March. That means it's time for the Final Four. Ish, how you doing today?
I'm doing good. Ready to talk about, I guess, one more women's game and then previewing every Final Four, or both Final Fours, I should say, for the men's and women's, because we got representation in both.
Yes, we do. We'll start off by talking about Texas and TCU women's basketball Elite Eight game. The matchup we were hoping to get. And like we talked about last podcast, TCU takes down Notre Dame. A very, very impressive performance from Haley Van Lith and Sedona Prince and company. Really shut down Hannah Hidalgo and Olivia Miles. Olivia Miles ends up entering the portal. We'll talk about that later. But it's set up for this really intriguing matchup between Texas and TCU, two very, very different teams. We talked about it a little bit in the last podcast where, obviously Texas defense against TCU's offense, Haley Van Lith against Rory Harmon and Madison Booker and so on. And the game last night, well, first of all, Texas ends up winning 58-47. But it was a game that was tied late in the third quarter. Fourth quarter, it was close, and then Texas starts pulling away. I think actually at the end of the third quarter, they started separating a little bit to get to like 5, 6.
Right.
And against Texas, 5 or 6 points feels like 10. So with that being the case, Texas is able to kind of keep its stranglehold and hold on for an 11-point win and advance to the Final Four. So congratulations to Vic Schaefer and Texas for making to the Final Four. But immediate thoughts, immediate reactions to this game and Texas win over TCU.
Yeah, if you're a TCU fan, you're probably a little frustrated, I'd say, or at least for me, as watching it from the TCU perspective, I was frustrated because one, obviously, because the offense wasn't what we had kind of hoped it, or if TCU was going to win, the offensive production wasn't what it needed to be. Haley Van Lith didn't play very well. She had a lot of turnovers. Texas basically keyed in on her and said, like, hey, basically anybody else do something. They basically sent blitzes after her. They sent, hard hedges and all. Like, it was very, very centric on her. And when you don't have another ball handler, right? If like TCU doesn't, it really frustrates what you can do on that side of the ball. I think I texted you that it was like midway through the first period, and I was like, I don't think TCU's taking a dribble inside the high post area, like complete. Like they were just like all perimeter oriented. They couldn't get Sedona Prince established. Like it was very much a defensive. Vic Schaefer, which is why he's one of the best in the country, got them to play his game, and I think the frustrating part comes from it wasn't that Texas was necessarily dominant on the other end either, right? It was a lot of leaning on Rory Harmon early on, right, scoring wise, and it felt like the game was within like arm's reach, but TCU could never really move it in closer, right? They never found the groove that they needed to on offense to really make anything happen. Because, like I said, Texas didn't necessarily play very well offensively, and it was just that TCU couldn't establish anything on their end. So yeah, if you're a TCU fan, you're obviously looking back on the season with very, very positive, very overall very positive, but you're like, dang, that's it wasn't like Madison Booker went off. It wasn't like you lost to a team that just like completely overwhelmed you.
This is what Texas does, man.
Yeah.
We talked about it before. We've talked about it the entire season. It is, I'm not gonna lie, man. It's hard to watch.
It's. I mean, look, you cover a team that does a version of this, right? Like not to the same level, but like there are
even
some of
Kim
the best
Mulkey,
in the country. You can look at three. I would put Vic Schaefer, Kim Mulkey, and Dawn Staley in like the same category of like the style that they play, but Kim Mulkey and Dawn Staley have been known to do different variations of that to where it's not just ugly the game up and just impose your size. That's all Vic Schaefer and Texas do.
The LSU under Kim Mulkey, like since she's taken over, and Dawn Staley too. This was probably a little different for Kim at Baylor because they were obviously a lot more lumbering. But like at LSU, they've ran like they've been top 20 in the country in like pace every year. Texas is like in the bottom 10. They're the last in the SEC. They're the slowest team. force the most turnovers. They shoot at under 40% basically every game. It feels like it's like they shoot no threes. And this is not a podcast. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I've started this off talking about the aesthetics of watching Texas, but
I
that's
mean, I get
it ties into
Yeah.
why TCU feels like they were in the game,
Yeah.
because watching it, it's like, oh, TCU's tied in the second quarter. TCU's
Mhm.
tied in the third or is pushing in the third. And it all just felt like a facade because this is just what Texas does. They
Mhm.
don't win comfortably. They don't win pretty. They don't win by hitting threes. They're not
Mhm.
going to bombard you at any point. They're not going to go on some 15-0 run. They just slowly take the life out of you and win the game.
Mhm.
And so that's why I started off by talking about the aesthetics, because it feels like if you're TCU, we should have been better. But then you look at the box score, you were 12 of 45 from the field with 21 turnovers, and 19
Yeah.
of your points came at the free throw line. Like,
Mhm.
under no circumstance do I think TCU deserved to win this game, or like TCU was better for stretches. Like, Texas was the better team. They
Mhm.
defended well. It's just watching the game, you're like, this is what's gonna like get to the Final Four here. And if you're a TCU fan, it's frustrating because, man, it felt like they're just all over you every second, full
Yeah.
court, picking up. Like in the first quarter, I don't know how many turnovers they had in the first quarter, but it felt like 5, 6, or 7. It felt like a lot, and it just completely threw them off from the start. And like you said, I think you made a great point with which the point I was going to make was they were blitzing Haley Van Lith screens or hard hedging and rotating really well. And it goes back to what we said the reason why we said at the beginning TCU couldn't beat Texas is because there wasn't enough variety, right?
Mhm.
They don't
Yeah.
have enough. If they had Maddie Share, then maybe they'd have some variety there. But
Right.
it's very much see what you get. And I got caught up last podcast in the hype, and I was wrong. So I apologize to Texas fans for that. But it went exactly how I expected to go. If you asked me a month ago, these two teams played, I'd
Right.
say, yeah, Texas just takes away Haley Van Lith and Sedona Prince, and the game's over, pretty much.
Yeah. And I mean, look, I think at this point we can kind of be honest with, the season as far as Sedona Prince is concerned. Like, she's a player who dominates when she's the biggest player on the floor, right?
Yeah.
There is a thing. There's a reason why she's not getting a lot of WNBA love. It's because when she plays players of her size, or at least comparatively, I think you see what you saw in this game, which is she struggles to establish her physicality. A lot of like Taylor Jones can just take the ball kind of right at her and kind of go right into her because her lower body strength is not the best. And she fouled out, like that's and again, TCU was gonna have the biggest player on the floor 90% of their games, right? And so that was able to play out that way for most of the season. But I think TCU would have been better if they would have went with the 4-1, 4-out, 4-out, 1-in, or 5-out, if I'm being honest, a 5-out offense, because that took the physicality out of the game, right? And that's what Texas wants to impose, is that inside presence. And you saw Oldecker, you saw Taylor Jones completely overwhelm whatever TCU tried to do in the post, in addition to whatever they had on the perimeter as well. So, yeah, again, like I don't blame Mark Campbell for sticking with what has worked up to this point, right? It's the tournament. It's not the NBA where you can, you have up to 7 games
Yeah.
to figure this out. But 2020 is hindsight's 2020. The season's still memorable for TCU, regardless of what happened in this game, win or lose. And if you're Texas, now you can look at this and like, Jody Conrad was on site, right? The last time a Texas team had made the Final Four, she was the head coach, and like she embraced Vic Schaefer afterward. It's a great moment for Rory Harmon. Like, I'm so glad that she's able to
Yeah.
play in the Final Four after what she's been through. And I believe this is Vic Schaefer's first Final Four since the Tierra McCowan Mississippi State team. So, like, this is a big moment for him, too. Like, you know, uh, those Mississippi State teams, like, were 1-2 with Don Staley for a lot of the time in the SEC. And obviously, he's trying to establish that now at Texas. But now this is still a guy who has not won a national title, right? And so the fact that he has a chance to do it, that Texas is back in the Final Four, like it's a really cool moment for honestly for both programs. Because if you're TCU, you're not mad that you made it to the Elite Eight.
No. And yeah, from Texas perspective, Madison Booker, 18 points, 8 of 17 shooting. She came up with some really big shots.
Mm.
those, especially obviously those pull-ups that she's able to hit
Yeah.
consistently. And then Harmon is still my MVP of this game, even
Oh,
though,
yeah, I think so too.
like, offensively, I think you mentioned, like, she started the game pretty strong, and then, like, second half, she couldn't really buy one for a lot of it.
Mhm.
But defensively, this is why she was my SEC Defensive Player of the Year,
Yeah.
because, like, she just destroys opposing guards. And I'm not saying she destroyed Haley Van Lith. They were throwing a lot at Haley Van Lith. It was not just
Mhm.
Rory Harmon, but, like, early in the game, Rory Harmon forced, like, 4 turnovers in the first half,
Yeah.
single-handedly.
And then in addition to being there, probably their only offensive threat at that time.
Yeah, so, you take that, obviously Taylor Jones, another very good, a fun story for her, coming
Yeah.
off of, or not fun coming off of the injury, but the way she's bounced back for her to outplay Sedona Prince in this way, and, not have a huge
Mhm.
statistical game, but I just think from her physicality and what she was able to do. And then Kyla Oldecker transfers in, and she makes a Final Four. She makes an impact. The freshman we talked about last podcast, Lee and Preston, both contributing. So, Shea Holly's been there for years at this point. So
Mhm.
very, very, very good Texas team. Great execution, I'd say. Vic Schaefer knows what he's doing, knows what wins basketball games, and
Yeah.
they did that. And full credit to them. And now, I mean, do you have anything else in this game before we move ahead?
No, I mean, no, it's like I said, we talked about TCU, great season for them.
Yeah, you
By the way,
gave them
some
their flowers.
interesting, yeah, like they get Maddie Share next year, right? They
Mhm.
obviously have to figure out what they do in the post without Sedona Prince, but Mark Campbell established this roster in like a year or two. So like I'm not concerned at all with what TCU has. They're going to be big players in the portal. Yeah, so they'll be just fine.
Man, the rumors of Olivia Miles to TCU,
Whoo,
only
buddy, if
only
those rumors come true,
Trilly
that
Donovan's the only one out there posting about it, but I don't care. I'm with it
he's
right
a, I
now.
mean, he's a legit source. So
Oh, he's a
like,
very legit source. So if there's smoke
so
there, I'm in it. I'm in it.
look, Olivia Miles and Maddie Sure instantly just like are just the best backcourt in the Big 12 again. Like it's just instantly.
Yes.
It's awesome. Like they're honestly because I mean we'll talk about the Final Four in a bit, but like what in the country next year? Who's a better backcourt on paper?
Nobody.
Like like like
I mean,
like
like, if
whoever
LSU got
whoever USC maybe gets next to Juju, but
Juju,
like
yeah.
that's
Um,
kind of it.
yeah, I was gonna say if LSU got tonight Latson with
Yeah.
Flage, but, like, yeah, we're having conversations in that
Mhm.
realm next year.
Yeah.
So, off-season podcasts on the way with all that stuff.
Yep.
Um, let's stick with the women's here. Let's go Texas versus South Carolina to start
Okay.
things off in this Final Four.
Woo.
Who is right? Fourth meeting of the year, right? Fourth
Yeah.
fourth time they've met. South Carolina leads 2-1 in the
Mhm.
series because that's what it is at this point. They last played on March 9th in the SEC championship game. South Carolina won by 19. Um, both teams won on their home court. I think
Yeah.
this is pretty clearly, to me, the main concern is South Carolina's depth and their speed, and the fact that they're not afraid of Texas defense.
Yes.
Right? Like, when you watch them play Texas, it feels different than any other team playing Texas. Like, I've
Mhm.
watched LSU, I've watched TCU, I've watched Tennessee, all these teams play Texas and be, like, overwhelmed with their defense. South Carolina is probably the only team in the country that's not scared of their pressure, and they can come at you in waves with these guards that they have. Um, that's what scares me from a Texas perspective, and that's why I think they've lost 2 out of 3 of these games, because ultimately South Carolina just has too much firepower and too much talent at the guard spots and knows how to kind of attack them really well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for me, a couple things need to happen in this one. I do think Texas needs the whistle in this game, like for
Mm,
better and worse. They need to be able to generate free throws. That was something they just did not do in the SEC championship game. And when they won, I think both teams finished with like around 20 or so. But like as we've mentioned with Vic Schaefer, like he loves to establish that physicality. And like if they're able to generate stuff at the line, that slows things down, right? That
yeah.
slows it down for South Carolina too. That slows things down for Texas. That makes you play their game inside. So I think they're gonna, I mean, again, whatever you want from that, I do think they're gonna need to Madison Booker, probably first and foremost, to establish herself as a scoring threat early on.
Yeah.
And look, if in my opinion, if Rory Harmon's the leading scorer again, or at some points the leading scorer, I don't think Texas wins this game. South Carolina, they're so. I mean, obviously, we've talked about the depth of South Carolina, and that's like the biggest hurdle that, or the biggest
Yes.
obstacle that they have. But like even just the depth, even without the depth, like just the talent of their starting unit, like as how they play defensively and offensively, like the fact that the past couple weeks it's been Chloe Kitts, right? The
Yeah.
past couple before that it was Tahina Powell. Like any game could be any players, or yeah, any game could be any player's moment, right? Um, we've gone this far without mentioning Malaysia for Wiley is just like off the bench, and it's like
Yeah. Joyce Edwards.
Texas, yeah, like Texas needs to play this perfect game almost. And they did against the game in the game that they won. They played a perfect game where Madison Booker was the best player on the floor, and probably on both ends. And she was able to get to the line a lot. She finished with a double, I think, in rebounds. And like,
Mm-hmm.
I think you need that game. You just straight up need that game from her. Yeah, and I do think they're going to need. Again, we'll say it because we can make a joke about the shooting, but I do think they need one of the freshmen to be a factor, right?
Yeah.
I'm not saying from the outside or whatever, but I do think either Brina
Carson
Preston or
Lee.
Jordan Lee need to be some type of factor in this game.
Yeah. Go back to the game that they won. Like you said, it did
Yeah.
feel like a perfect storm, and it was at home,
Mhm.
where Madison Booker 20 and 11. She drew 8 fouls. Madison Booker did. Like
Mhm.
that's what
Yeah.
you're gonna need from her. Taylor Jones had 11 and 6 in 20 minutes. Kyla Oldecker had 13 and 6 in 20
Mhm.
minutes. They split that perfectly. So between your center position, you got 24 and 12.
Yeah.
That's where they need to win. They need to be able to outplay Sanaya Fagan significantly. And Fagan's a fine player,
Yeah.
but the reason South Carolina's ceiling is lower this year, or maybe their floor is lower this year, is because Ashlyn Watkins got hurt, right? The center
Mhm.
for them. So now it's Fagan is their really only true center here, and Texas has to attack that. I think Madison Booker has to play probably the best game of her career, and then the center position. Those are the two for me. Like you mentioned, it would be great if they hit some threes. I think the biggest thing is just don't get killed from behind the 3-point line. Like if you only
Yeah.
hit one, South Carolina can't hit 7, 8.
Right.
Like there can't be a plus 21 disparity in the 3-point line. In the game that they won, they held South Carolina 5 of 19 from 3. That's fine. If they shoot
Mhm.
25% from 3, you live. That's the biggest thing. It's just like I look at the box scores and I think back on those games, and going back to what I said about how South Carolina is just not phased by the pressure in
Yeah.
the ways other teams are. They only had 10 turnovers. Even in the game Texas won,
Mm.
South Carolina only had 10 turnovers in that game. So it's like you're most likely not going to force South Carolina into like 20 plus turnovers in most situations here because they just control the game so well. Even in the SEC championship game, the game South
Yeah.
Carolina won by 20, Texas actually forced 15 turnovers, but it just wasn't quite enough because nothing else went in the hoop. They shot 16
Yeah.
of 54 from the field.
If you
So
want, yeah, if you want a different matchup, because like you can look at Rory Harmon versus Raven Johnson, or what you can look at stuff like that. But like if you want a matchup that's below, kind of in the more role player, quote unquote role player role, I think it's Chloe Kitts versus Taylor Jones. Chloe Kitts, South Carolina. I don't think it's a coincidence that South Carolina's best performances come when they have somebody establishing inside scoring, right? And more often than not, I think recently it's been Chloe Kitts, 10 points, 15 points, 10, or excuse me, this is going back to the SEC championship, but in the tournament, 14, 15, 10, 10, 15 against Texas in the title game, 10, 25, 12, 16, right? So like
yeah,
her consistent output. And then you look at the game they lost, she only had 9, the South Carolina lost to Texas, she only had 9 points. Taylor Jones outscored her, had a
yeah,
little bit of a better defensive game. So I do think that if you can look, I feel like whatever player outplays each other in that department, I think you can probably guess who wins that game.
yeah. The challenge is South Carolina then brings Joyce Edwards in for
Yeah.
her. You're
Right.
like, oh, okay. All right, cool. So I do think this is an uphill challenge for Texas. I would favor, and I'm going to pick South Carolina here. I'd pick them in my initial bracket.
Mm-hmm.
Here. Oh no, I picked Notre Dame. Now here, let me play devil's advocate for a second because
Okay. What you got?
South Carolina, the past 2 games has barely won.
Good point. Good point.
Like people watched. I didn't get to watch the very last game where they beat Duke, but
And Duke, I mean,
everything I
Duke
read
wasn't
was like,
exactly a team that everybody loved in the dance.
yeah, it was like everything I read and saw from that game was like, oh man, Duke had it. Duke
Yeah.
was there, right there. And even if you go back to Maryland in the Sweet
Mm-hmm.
16, that was an
Mm-hmm.
uncomfortable game for South Carolina. So I think, and I watched a good amount of the Maryland game. It didn't feel like offensively South Carolina is clicking at the highest level. So I
Mm-hmm.
think from Texas' perspective, there is a chance that your defense can bog them down a bit. Like
Mm-hmm.
I still don't think Texas is ever going to score like 65 points on South Carolina. If you
Right.
win, it's going to have to be similar to TCU. Like you're going to have to hold them to like 55, 50 points. But South Carolina the past 2 games has been very vulnerable. So I know I've made it sound like South Carolina is a juggernaut team. They're
Mm-hmm.
not. I just think they're really good and they can handle Texas pressure. But
Yeah.
they have not been what they've been in years past. They have not been Superman. They
Sure.
are very, very vulnerable this year. So I do want to give that shred of optimism here because I do think it's valuable.
Yeah.
Okay. The other women's semifinal game is UConn and UCLA. We'll give picks on that. What do you think happens there? Who do you like? UCLA beat LSU. UConn beat USC without Juju.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
I'm sticking with UConn because I had UConn. I have UConn winning the national title. But I mean, it took a while for them to beat USC. Without Juju. So I think, I mean, honestly, USC maybe wins that game if they had a healthy Juju Watkins. So that worries me a little bit against UCLA. But to UCLA's credit, they've kind of done nothing but be the team that they were at the start of the season when like the only team that's had their number all year has basically been USC.
Yeah.
Um, and so, like, listen, Lauren Betts and Kiki Rice are like, that's probably the best. I mean, that might be the best tandem left as far as like just two players in the dance left. Um,
Okay.
I mean, again, take your pick on
Well,
Booker.
it's either that or one of the UConn,
Right, right,
age.
right.
age.
But like, I mean, I see the path, right? I definitely see the path for this to happen because you were there watching the LSU game, so you can probably speak on UCLA a little better than I can. But I mean, I see the path for them mainly because UConn didn't look that great against a hobbled USC.
Yeah. And UConn took a little bit. Now they ended up blowing out Oklahoma, but they were down at halftime and they
Mhm.
struggled a little bit. All these teams have been vulnerable. Like
Yeah.
even UCLA in the earlier rounds was vulnerable. I'm gonna flip my pick to UCLA here. I
Okay.
also had UConn going into this tournament. Um, the thing for me is I'm really impressed with, and I've been impressed with this all year, their ability to shoot the ball and
Mhm.
the fact that they added Tamia Gardner and Janiah Barker to this team.
Yeah.
I think they're actually like the deepest team outside of South Carolina, but also I think they have more like top end talent than even South Carolina does,
Mhm.
right? I think Lauren Betts is up there. And Janiah Barker, credit to her, man. She has figured it out. She started the year
Yeah.
off the bench. We were like, oh, I'm not really sure if she fits here. She has bought in, and this is the Janiah Barker that we've wanted to see
Mhm.
from when she went to A&M, as a top whatever recruit and everything like that. Now she has finally figured it out, and she's not having to do as much. Obviously playing alongside Betts. They hit a lot of threes against LSU. I
Mhm.
don't know if that's sustainable per se, but it at least gives them a puncher's chance here to match anything Fudd and Beckers do. So I'll switch it to UCLA. I think it's gonna be a really fascinating game. They're both very really crazy, crazy games here. I mean,
Yeah.
it's all the 1 seeds or UConn's a 2
Except
technically,
big
but
UConn. Yeah.
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 All
No, I
right,
mean, I agree.
go
Like,
ahead.
that's good you mentioned. I'm glad you mentioned Barker again because yeah, she's getting back to that like point forward, kind of role because she's so athletic and she's so much bigger than and quick. She's bigger than the guards, and she's obviously quicker than the other forwards she plays.
Mhm.
And yeah, it feels like she's bought into a role for the betterment of her and the team. So like she's not trying to be the leading scorer anymore. And so yeah, obviously when you have Lauren Betts and even Jaquez who's stepping in, has been stepping up a lot in the tournament as well. But Lauren Betts and Kiki Rice kind of manning everything, you can kind of play on the perimeter and just like kind of play on the peripheries, I should say, and let the game come to you. And yeah, I mean, that's a bit like obviously UCLA is the bigger team, but we'll see if just Paige Becker's talent and AZ Fudge just is able to be two of the probably 3-4 best players on the floor. UConn, that's what UConn's going to need. But yeah, I don't know. UConn's been that game against USC for like 70% of it. I was like, I don't know. I was very worried, especially how good UCLA's looked at times.
Yeah. So I have UCLA, South Carolina in my championship now for picking from this group here.
Yeah.
I don't know who the heck I'd pick out of that. Man,
Yeah.
that would be an incredible basketball game.
Yeah.
I'll take UCLA. I think UCLA has enough right now to get over the hump. And I also Corey Close is a phenomenal coach,
Mhm.
just a phenomenal coach. So that'll be my championship pick right now.
I'm sticking with mine. I'm sticking with UConn over South Carolina. But I did. If I had to switch one, it'd be UCLA. Oh, it'd be UCLA with South Carolina probably winning in the end.
Yeah.
But right now I'm going to stick with it. UConn over South Carolina.
All right, on to the men's side. We'll start with Houston versus Duke here before we get to that SEC stuff over there. We don't need to worry about that. We got Houston is the number 2 team in KenPom. Duke is the number 1 team in KenPom. Both of them have been absolutely outstanding. If you have not been paying attention to college basketball, this is the best Houston season ever right now. And I'm not exaggerating at all, like in terms of all the metrics. Bart Torvik, KenPom, I don't care. Even if you just watch the eye test right now, this team is better than last year's team.
Yeah.
They're playing at an outstanding level. They just blew out Tennessee in the Elite Eight, the number 5 team in the country, by the way. Duke, on the other hand, has been phenomenal. They were my pick to win it all. They're still probably my pick to win it all. They have been playing. They just blew out Alabama by 20 points. They have looked like a machine. They're the only team here that's not led by a bunch of seniors and older players. Cooper Flagg, Conk-Nipple, Common Malawach are all freshmen, but incredibly talented freshmen.
Yeah.
When you start looking at this game, what's the key for Houston here to get a win?
Man, if I'm so first of all, you should mention it's also the number 1 offense was the number 1 defense in the country, right? Duke has the number 1 offense, Houston has the number 1 defense. And yeah, these are 2 teams that have blown out the 5 and 6 teams in KenPom in the last round. Bama was 6 and Duke beat them by the way, with Cooper Flagg not playing well. Like they pummeled them. Where do you start? I think you try to start with basically having Conk-Nipple and Malawach win this game if you're Kelvin Sampson. Which again is scary because they literally just did it the last round.
Yeah.
But
I think that's where they match up best.
Right, exactly. So like you look at the biggest mismatch, which of course he's the biggest mismatch for anybody in the country, which it's Cooper Flagg.
Yeah.
Houston has no one player that matches up well against him. But you look at, and here's the thing, you mentioned it. This is also the youngest team, right?
Yeah.
They've been the most talented. That's why they've been able to make it this far. That's why they look this good. Cooper Flagg is obviously a generational talent. Malawach and Conk-Nipple are going to be also probably top 10 picks. But there is something that's haunted young teams before, which is when you run up against an experienced team and an experienced coach, there are just little things here and there that young players haven't, faced yet versus a team that can game plan as well as Houston, right? So again, I'm picking Duke in this game, but I'm trying to figure out things that have befallen talented young teams before. Particularly, I mean, we saw with Duke in the last time they had a generational talent, Zion Williamson. They fell to an experienced Michigan State team and an experienced coach. And you have a team in Houston that's, for every misstep that they've had in the past, as far as like not being good offensively, not whatever, they've corrected that. You mentioned this. This is the best on paper Houston team we've ever seen. The only problem is it might be the best on paper Duke team we've ever seen.
Duke team, best Duke team we've ever seen.
We've
Like,
seen so many Duke
we're
teams
talking about
over the
Duke
course of history.
at the very least of this century. It's the best
Yeah.
Duke team
Duke's
ever.
won a national title this century, and they're probably looking to be
I
one of the best.
mean,
Let me find Matt Norlander's tweet where he mentions the top 10 teams in KenPom all time. Go
I
ahead, say
no,
your
yeah,
piece.
go
I'm gonna
ahead.
look for this
I
tweet.
think we're like 99 or 98, one of those Duke teams. I don't
Yeah,
know.
so yeah, 90. Let me see, best 10 KenPom teams ever. So 98, 99 Duke is number one. 2024, 2025 Duke is number two.
Yeah, I'm
So
like,
like,
so here's the thing. When I watch Duke play,
yeah,
what stands out to me beyond the fact that their offense has been an absolute juggernaut and
yeah.
is unstoppable, like their defense is actually outstanding.
This Auburn, I'll let you finish, or excuse me, I'll let you finish. That Alabama game was terrifying because Alabama, they played the game Alabama wanted to play and played them off the floor.
Just Alabama didn't feel like they could breathe
Right.
a lot of the game and just took away Mark Sears. And so the concern is if they take away Mark Sears, like, are they going to take away LJ Cryer like that?
Right.
Like, do I believe in LJ Cryer to get loose here against a starting lineup that's 6'7", 6'6", 6'6", 6'9", 7'2"? Like, this is also one of the tallest teams in the country here. It is actually the number one tallest team in the country.
Yep.
Um, and so they're playing at a level defensively that matches their offense and gives them a transition opportunities, and Flag gets going. And like you said, Flag didn't even play well against Bama. Like, he couldn't make a shot in the second half.
And they won by
And
20.
it just didn't matter.
Yeah.
I do think just from a talent perspective is terrifying. Where Houston has to do to win this game, first of all, they have to find a way to generate threes. They are
Yeah.
the
Sure.
best.
Yeah.
They're the number 3 3-point shooting team in the country from a percentage
Mhm.
standpoint. They do take they're in the middle of the pack of the country in terms of attempts, but then they have to slow it down.
Yep.
Like, they are 360th in the country in tempo. That's how slow this game needs to go.
Yeah.
This game cannot be in the open court. This game cannot be in transition at any point. I would try not to take a shot in the first 10 seconds of shot clock at any point. This game needs to be worked around, and Houston has to just make some shots from deep to really unsettle Duke. Because at that point, if you can unsettle Duke, if Houston throws the first punch,
Yeah.
Houston's defense can make Duke work. Like,
Oh,
that's
100%.
not out of the question here.
Yeah.
And if Duke is unsettled as all these freshmen that we've talked about, then yeah, you go down 5 points to Houston going to the second half, and Houston comes out like rabid dogs coming at you and hitting you,
Mhm.
then yeah, you're going to start to feel unsettled here as you're sitting in the Alamo Dome with however many thousands of people watching you. So my advice is, my take is slow it down, hit threes, and just try to make them uncomfortable with your physicality here. And
Yeah.
hopefully they can throw the first punch.
Yeah. Don't take our, praising of Duke as like Houston has no chance. I think it's a 2-point game according to KenPom. I
Yeah,
think it's Vegas has a Duke minus 4.5, which is still a pretty big margin for a team of, these two teams being this good. But
it is.
yes, there is a blueprint here. I think the one thing I noticed that Alabama did, and again, this is part of the way they play, this is part of the tempo that they play with as well. They basically sagged off like every screen, and like Con Kneppel was just able to just punish. And so if you're Houston, you don't do that, right? You're obviously not a team that sags off screens. You're going to
No.
pressure the ball. You're going to make him move back on the 3-point line. That's where I'm interested to see this young team. Kneppel's still a freshman. This young team, what happens when it's not as easy to get in the paint when you come off a ball screen? Because right now, like against Alabama, okay, Cayman Malawak sets a screen, cool. It's church, right? You were
Yeah.
able to get whatever you generate, whatever you want, and Malawak was able to roll to the rim and hit some lobs as well. So like, obviously, that's not going to be as easy because hey, JoJo Tugler, Javier Francis, and Juwan Roberts are going to be waiting there in the paint. The game is going to be won and lost on the perimeter, in my opinion, because you're gonna if you're Houston, you have to make Tyrese Proctor and Con Kneppel uncomfortable coming off those ball screens because Malawak's going to set a ton of screens, right? Flag's going to set a ton of screens. And it's about Francis stepping up. It's about Tugler stepping up and just making sure that those rolls to the basket are not there. And then, like you said, the cheat code with this Duke team is that they're also very good defensively, right? They're lengthy as hell. That's going to be a big challenge. This is going to be the biggest game. I mean, honestly, is this the best offensive, or excuse me, the best defensive team that Kelvin Sampson's faced since the Baylor Final Four? Because like we're talking about offense, clearly they're one of the best offensive teams they've faced. But like I'm talking about defensively, talent wise, and physicality. Like that Baylor team switched everything. That Baylor team was so athletic. They weren't the biggest, but like they were just so sound and athletic defensively. This team has that athleticism, and they're also just bigger.
Yeah, like they're like I know Tennessee's a good defensive team, dude. No, I'm taking this Duke team over them.
Again, you mentioned the size, right? You mentioned the size. Everybody's over 6'6" on the starting lineup.
Sorry, Zakai Ziegler and Gainey.
Yeah, no, I'm more afraid of Con Kneppel and Tyrese Proctor guarding me than I am of Zakai Ziegler. Sorry.
Yeah. Here's one more thing to my point of slowing it down. I go back to when Duke played Illinois, and beat the brakes off them, beat them by 40 points. Illinois is 17th in the country in adjusted tempo.
Yeah.
Duke's one loss in conference play came to Clemson.
Yep.
Clemson is 328th in tempo. I think there is a sense of, and they're 360. Clemson is 364th in opponent or defensive tempo, I guess, however you want to phrase it, where teams take a longer times to work against them. Houston's 353rd in that. Like, I do think there is something to where this Duke team just wants to play free, and they're not like super fast, let's say, but they do want to play with some freedom to be able to take shots whenever they want. If you can work them deep in the clock, I think there is some uncomfortability there, and Houston can definitely do that. Like, I wouldn't be surprised at all if the first half was like 25-24 or something like that, like some sort of low-scoring game and uncomfortable game just to start off, and then we'll see from there. But that is Houston's path to me, slowing it down and trying to free up Sharp and Cryer for some threes and just bang with them on the inside. Roberts, Tugler.
I will say that's going to be something that's going to be big too. They need to make Malawak work in the post.
Oh yeah,
like defensively work. He can't be roaming. He can't be able to do help side defense. They have to go at Juwan Roberts. They have to go to Juwan Roberts offensively and establish him as a threat to be able to make Malawak work. Because if he's just drifting, like that's terrifying. That dude's going to be like a future defensive MVP, defensive player of the year in the NBA someday. Like he is a terrifying presence, and they have to be able to take that away a little bit. And by making him work on both sides, because he's going to be, rim running on offense anyway. So yeah, Juwan Roberts needs to use his experience, which he's done against younger bigs before, right? Yeah. He's been able to establish himself low, like you said, slow the game down, do a little couple, 3 dribbles, boom, hook shot, boom. Like that's going to be something they probably need to go to a little early on. But yeah, I can't stress how excited I am for this game. I think this game is going to be one of the best we've seen in the tournament. These are two teams that have lost once since November, right? Both these teams have lost once since November. Houston didn't even lose in regulation, right? It was on the road at Tech or at home at Tech in overtime. And then you mentioned the Clemson loss. Once since November, both teams. That's crazy. Houston's wrecked through the Big 12. Duke wrecked the ACC and then won the title without Cooper Flagg in the ACC. Yeah. So, I think these are two of the best teams in the country. I'm very disappointed that we're getting this in the Elite Eight, the Final Four, not the championship, but we'll see.
Yeah, both the men's and the women's. I wish they could set it up to where the SEC teams weren't playing each other in the Final Four.
Yeah,
but at the same time,
I know. I wish we would have got Houston, Florida, Auburn, Duke.
Yeah, like at the same time though, I do think in both situations there was a clear number 4 1 seed. Like Florida's the clear 4 seed here, and the women's side USC was the clear 4 seed. There. So, you can't really do anything about it. But to the other side, we don't have to go as in depth here, but Florida, Auburn, we talked about Florida last podcast with Texas Tech nearly beating them. Auburn flirted with Michigan for a little bit, then blew them out, and then against Michigan State, kind of just took control early, was up 23-10, and Michigan State tried coming back. They just didn't have enough.
Yeah.
I will say I don't think Auburn's really been tested to this point. I
No.
think Texas
Yeah.
Tech is better than any team that Auburn has faced to this point, including Michigan State. I'm not high on that Michigan State team at all.
Yeah, they were very frustrating to watch.
Florida took care of Maryland, beat them by 16, and then came back and beat Texas Tech. So I do think, and beat UConn. So
Mhm.
that's not nothing either. So I do think Florida's been more battle tested to this point. Janai Broome left their game with an injury and then came back, so he's fine. This is another awesome game, man.
This look, I said it before on the last show. If you're mad about the no upsets, this is your reward. You get the four
Yeah,
best teams in the country
yeah,
playing each other that like have weaknesses that can all be exploited, but like also their upsides are just so much bigger than anybody else's in the country. Like we mentioned it, Janai Broome is going to be number 1 or 2 with Cooper Flag for Player of the Year. Walter Clayton Jr. is going to be right there with them. 4 coaches who have never won a national title, right? Like
mhm,
this is going to be awesome. You talk about the hottest team in the country in Florida. You talk about the team that people wrote off probably a month ago in Auburn because it was like, oh, well, they've lost, 3 of the last 4 or whatever.
yep,
Dude, like this game is going to be so much fun. I'm picking Florida. I think I'm picking Florida in this one because you mentioned it. I think they've been more tested. I think that Tech, the way they won that Tech game, showed that upside that they had shown for the latter half of the season. Where you're like, man, they could just hit shots like no one's business. Obviously Walter Clayton, but the way they spaced the floor with somebody like Thomas Hall, who's like maybe a third option for that, like it was impressive.
yeah. So
And Janai
good.
Broome, look, we're gonna need a Janai Broome game. We're gonna need a 25-13 type of game from him if you're Auburn. But like that's not out of the realm of possibility. He can give you that. He's given them that this whole time. Even if that Michigan State team wasn't that great, I do think that they were able to muddy that game in the way Michigan State wanted to, and still establish themselves as the better team. So
Yeah, Broome had 25 and 14 against Michigan State. Against the 7-footers of Michigan, he had 22 and 16.
that was an impressive one right there because Danny Wolf and Vlad Golden played terribly in that game, and Janai Broome was the best big on that floor.
Now, Kalkbrenner for Creighton did do a good job against him
Yeah, yeah.
in that game, so there is some hope for their Florida there. I If you'd asked me like a week ago, I think I would have picked Florida.
Mhm.
I still think Walter Clayton is the reason Florida's here, clearly
Yeah,
with the
yeah.
Texas Tech game. But like even beyond that, like go back to the UConn game, he just made shots, and he is an absolute shot maker in the highest degree. To
Mhm.
where I'm excited to see him in the NBA. I know he's older, but like I'm excited to see him at the next level and see what
He
he can
strikes me
do.
as like a Desmond Bain type where you're
Something
like,
like that,
yeah,
yeah.
you're like he goes late first because he's older, but then he hits the ground running and he's like averaging 15 points a game when you look up.
Yeah, I'm trying to look at it. He just turned 22, so it's not even like
He's not
he's
even, yeah, I mean, we're in the portal era. There's 24-year-olds getting
right,
drafted now. So
right. But yeah, Clayton is the X factor here, and he's the
yeah.
reason why I'm hesitant to pick Auburn.
Mhm.
Obviously Alex Condon, Elijah Marshall, Will Richard, Chinelu, Hall. You mentioned, fantastic Florida team here that is number 2 in the country in offense. They play fast. They're number 5 in offensive rebounding percentage. I do think this game will be determined on the glass.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it
yeah.
might just be a stalemate because you just have 2 elite rebounding teams. Florida is a better rebounding team than Auburn, and I think that's their best path to doing it because
Yes.
they come at you with, I think, more versatile bigs than
Mhm.
Auburn does. Auburn just kinda comes at you with bigs that are just gonna punch you in the mouth repeatedly with
Right.
Broome and Chaney Johnson, and, Dylan Cardwell, obviously. Just old guys that are just ready to punch you in the mouth. I d But then for Auburn, Tahad Pettiford, Denver Jones, Miles Kelly, like, that backcourt can get hot so quickly. I do think they have Auburn does, enough variety here to counteract um, Florida's size and Florida's rebounding ability. So I'm going to stick with Auburn here. They were my pick in this game. Well, I had Auburn over Texas Tech, which was so close. I had a friend who picked all number 1 seeds, and I was like, I don't regret a thing because I had 3 1 seeds and I had Texas Tech. I mean, how so close, so
Yeah.
close.
Yeah.
But yeah, I am going to stick with Auburn here. I think they are going to get it done and advance to the championship game against Duke. I do think Duke gets it done against Houston as well.
Yeah. I'm gonna
And I'm
stick.
gonna stick with Duke.
You're gonna pick Duke.
I'm gonna stick with Duke over Auburn in my championship game.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's not. I think I had. Let me see. I want to double check on this.
The thing is, none of these 4 winning would surprise me.
Right. No,
Like,
this is
that's
like
how
the
good
first.
they are.
I think Gary Parrish mentioned this, or it might have been Norlander, I can't remember, where he mentioned like usually there's like because there's a Cinderella somewhere, usually of some sorts in the Final Four, Elite Eight, you more or less can eliminate one of the teams having a shot, right? Like NC State, great story last year. They weren't winning. We knew they weren't winning a national title. This is the first year in a long time where you looked at it and you're like, damn, like any of these guys, there's a story behind any of these guys. There's a path, a very viable path. And also, by the way, would it shock you if, and let's go back to Houston Duke, would any result shock you? 10-point win, 15-point win, either way, buzzer beater, either way, right? Like it wouldn't shock me if Houston just comes out and puts those young kids in a headlock, and then they're just they can't score, and then all of a sudden Houston wins by 15. It wouldn't shock me if we see Cooper Flagg and Kneppel throwing lobs to Malawak, and that ends up on their draft day tape, and then Duke wins by 15. It wouldn't shock me if we're down to the last shot with LJ Cry. Like that game in particular, I have no idea how that game's going to go. And I love that. But to your point, any of these teams can win a national title in any way. Like if Auburn comes out and blows all these teams out by 10, we're like, yeah, damn, you know what? They were the best team probably all year.
Yeah.
Like that's just like this is so much fun.
Yeah, exactly. I do think I don't know if it's not a bold take, but I'm gonna say Houston comes out and punches Duke in the mouth early. And I will have my tweet ready just like I did last year when Houston was up on it was Duke, right? When Jamal Shedd got hurt.
Yeah.
And I was like, welcome to hell. Welcome to hell, Duke. This is your worst nightmare, Houston. Now, would I be surprised that like I think that happens, and then also I think Duke finds its footing and like wins the game. But ultimately, I'm gonna have the tweet ready regardless. So, welcome to hell, Duke.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Duke. I'm gonna go Duke over Auburn. I think I had that as my pick to start. I'm gonna stick with it, but I'm so close to Duke over Florida instead. Just because Florida's been playing so well. But I'm gonna just like on the women's side, I'm gonna stick with my initial championship pick. So Duke over Auburn.
Good. All right. This is Tuesday. The women play Friday, Sunday, right? And the men play Saturday, Monday. I believe that's what it is.
Let me double check on that. But yes, that sounds right.
I believe that's right. So we got a few days to let this podcast marinate. Let everyone listen to it. Let everyone get their picks in. Let us know who you're picking down below. Leave us a like, comment, share, subscribe if you haven't already. We're going to talk about all the coaching changes, the portal changes. I just saw something that said gave me some Samaya Smith intel, and it looks like it's a Texas school potentially. More on that coming in the future podcasts.
Come home, girl.
Come on home. But yeah, thank you all for joining us. Enjoy the weekend. Enjoy the basketball. We will talk to y'all later.